So we've learned quite a lot about the building blocks required. We have almost all the foundations ready, but here we are with existing Rails applications which are looking nothing like the building blocks, which are looking nothing as the bounded context and so on. So how can we safely migrate with the focus on safely? This strategy I'm presenting you here is under certain assumptions, but knowing those assumptions may lead you to what are the preconditions and what you may want to start with. And the preconditions are that we have this Rails application mostly relying on service objects as the way of changing the data in your system. There are ways of avoiding that, but this is really a helpful step. It's a gateway drug to the domain-driven design or to better architectures, I think. And so service objects help a lot. And another precondition here is that, this might be the hard one, it's better if you are not relying on active record callbacks. At least not too much, and at least not to update other active record objects. Because if you just have active record callbacks for updating some infrastructure parts, then that's okay. At least you should have them under control. And the idea that you have service objects is also based on this assumption requires that you have one place for changing one piece of data. And again, this is not a huge requirement. You can control it and if you have other places, but that's a good design. If you have just one place where you can change the specific part of the data, then it's a good design overall that you should aim for. Okay, so let me explain what is the algorithm here. You are introducing some mechanism to publishing events and being able to subscribe to them. You can use Rails Event Store for that. You can write your own PubSub. You can write your own observer. We are talking about in-memory PubSub, in-memory observers. So nothing really fancy. In Rails Event Store, it would automatically also persist the events. But in the first step, persisting is not required. It's just nice to have. So you have this mechanism, and then in service objects, you find the service object. Let's say it's called register user. And there's certain things about active record that you are changing the user.create, for example. And then you add a line where you say event store.publish user registered. So user registered is the event. Event store is a new dependency for your service objects, whether you pass it as an argument constructor or something else. Up to you. It's a detail. You may want to access a singleton object, but probably not recommended, but this is a detail in this discussion. And once you have those events being published, first of all, you can just leave the code with the events being published and no one reacts to it. At least people in the team get used to that. The human factor in the teams is really important, that people understand what is going on. But let's say you have those events, you have user registered, you have user updated. That's not the best event, but let's say that for beginning it's okay. And then you are able to create read models based on that event. So you create a read model, and the read model would be subscribing to user registered, user updated, user deleted. 3 possible events. I know they sound cruddish. Better to have, instead of user updated, better to have like user email changed or user email provided or something like this. But let's say that that's the way we have started with. So then we have read models, and the read models, they are assuming that they know about every kind of user registered situation or user updated or user deleted, because if you have no control over how your data is being changed, and for example, there are some other ways which kind of avoid the service object, then your read model wouldn't be updated, and that's a big problem. So if you want to do it safely, be careful with that. But assuming everything is fine, you have it under control, the read model is now extracted, and you can look at the user active record class, because probably there are certain methods or certain maybe even attributes that are no longer required because they became part of the read model now. That's one gain from this kind of approach. The second gain is that you will see candidates for aggregates. So user is clearly an aggregate candidate here. It will be an aggregate. And thanks to the events, obviously I have provided an example like user registered, user updated, user deleted. There's like not much about domain vocabulary here, but that was a simple example. But for example, order submitted, order rejected, order approved. That builds the vocabulary more about the domain than about the CRUD words. So that's the last benefit here. And this is a very safe. It doesn't bring you huge benefits, but we are focusing here on safely migrating, which also means safely discussing in a team why we are doing those changes. Human factor is really the most important part here. So people need to understand why we are doing this, and people need to see that in a small changes, small design changes in your application. That's why it is a good approach overall. So this is like one migration strategy. Obviously, then it doesn't end there, but this is the beginning. This is a strategy for the beginning. Then you will introduce bounded context, maybe as an, based on understanding what is your vocabulary now, how you can group the vocabulary of those events. Those events belong together. Now you know what is the bounded context. So that would be like your starting point. And then once you have aggregates, and thanks to this approach, you will have aggregate candidates. You can persist them using event sourcing, and you can rely on event sourcing. The last step would be that you are removing the active records for the right side, also it means that once basically this approach, you can take it for the whole application, and in the end also the service object disappears, because once you have the service object just having load the aggregate, change the aggregate, it's actually becoming a command handler. So the last step will be to introduce commands before the service object. The service object becomes a command handler, and now we are fully in the shape that, for example, our sample application looks like. So that's, at least this way, this strategy can help you imagine what can be the steps for you to get from where you are right now to this kind of architectures we are talking about. I hope it helps. Thank you.